Hello, my name is Danny Cruz. I go by Pinchtune in the FPV community. I am making this video specifically for beginners. Normally, if you've been watching my channel, if you're a follower of my channel, you've been flying for a while, this video might not be for you. But if you have buddies who are just getting into the hobby, this might be a good video to show them. It is not going to be everything, but it's going to be a bit of a crash course on getting started, assuming you know certain things already. Regardless, my point is that you still have to do a little bit of more research because there's a lot that goes along in this hobby. There's a bit of a steep learning curve. A couple of things I want to point out before I get started. If you go look at my subscriber count, you'll see it's only about 1,300 to 1,400 subscribers at the moment this video is shot. I know you're gonna go look. Don't let that discredit this video. I know there's guys in FPV that have 30, 40,000, 100,000 subscribers. It does not mean they know more than me or anything like that. It just means they've promoted the channel better. I've only really started pushing the channel over the last year, so it's taken a while. I've been flying since 2014. I fly about 20 to 40 packs a week on a good week. Sometimes less, of course, but sometimes more. I've built over 50 quads, who knows what. I do freestyle, I do long range, I race. I'm not the fastest racer, you know, I'm 40 years old after all. These kids that are like winning right now are they're teens basically. But I still do it for fun. I am a decent freestyle pilot. I dabble in long range as well, and I fly many different types of quads, including the 3 main types of firmware. So I know my stuff, is basically what I'm saying. So don't let the subscriber count fool you. Be sure to subscribe. It'll help this channel grow eventually. Who knows, when you're seeing this, it might be a lot more. And at some point in the video, hit like as well, because it really helps. Let's do a preamble for this video and explain how we're gonna go about this. I'm not sure if I'm gonna add glossary, like notes in the comments for time code to show you different parts of the video. I might, depends on how when I watch it back. I expect this is gonna be kind of long, maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes, who knows, we'll see. But bear with me. Be sure to like put this video in your bookmarks or save it or do something, because you might want to go back over it a couple times, especially if you are starting out. It's something that you might want to go over a few times. There's a lot of good videos out there for starting to do this, but I'm gonna try and show you quite a bit of what you need to know as you get started. Okay, I think that's it for the intro. One thing I want to point out is that the focus of this video is, let's just say that you bought a ready to fly quad. Let's say you went on Banggood, or you went on to Armatan, or whoever that sells quads that are pre-built. I think Rotor Riot is doing it too as well, and a couple other companies are doing the same. But let's say you bought a pre-built quad because you wanted something already like turnkey, which they're not necessarily turnkey, but close. And I'm doing this for a reason. I've been one to recommend to people that they build their own. That's the way I started. That's the way most of us that started back in 5 years ago started. And I would recommend that. But however, if you think about it, if you start with a quad that's already built, there's certain caveats. Like, for example, when you break it, you're not going to know how to fix it. But you can always learn how to fix it. And probably it's easier to learn how to fix one component that you broke than to start from scratch building an entire quad. And have to learn everything at once. If you buy something already pre-built, again, it may not necessarily be the best option, but for some people it might actually be the best option. But doing so means that you could get into the air sooner, but you know, if you break something, you're gonna have a little bit of a hard time fixing it, and that's definitely one good reason for building it yourself. That said, if you build it yourself, there's a chance you're going to spend days or weeks building one before you even get to fly. So the ready to fly option is possibly a good one. This video, this is how this idea came about. I have a friend. His name is Mike. Really is Mike. I've sold a lot of quads through the years. You know, normally I sell quads in good condition either because I sometimes experiment a lot, so I'll build a lot of quads and end up not flying some of them very much, which is the example with this one, and they end up like kind of new, and I just sell them because I just don't fly them. Sometimes I sell ones that are cheap because I've flown them a lot, but I've always sold quads to people that already fly and just don't want to build their own, or they want to try something new, or they just want to get something into their fleet that's ready to go. And I've never actually sold a quad to a beginner. My friend Mike here, I believe he's been flying some stuff. I know he has a Spektrum radio, but I don't think he actually has flown a racing or a FPV quad before. And while I was getting it ready to ship for him, I started asking myself questions like, oh man, I mean, what am I going to do? How is he going to bind it? I fly FrSky, he flies Spektrum. I know how to do it. It's like as clean as daylight, as clear as daylight for me, but how am I going to transfer this to him so he understands? I don't want to just buy something, take his money, and send it over to him and hope I don't want him to get frustrated. So then a bulb came on, and I was like, hold on, I can do an intro video specifically about the quad that I'm sending him and have it for other people to learn from it as well, which is what this is going to be about. Let's start with the quad. Here it is. This is what's known as a 4-inch quad. Means it flies 4-inch props. The most popular prop in this hobby is actually 5-inch. And then you got 6 and 7-inch, but you go down to 4, which is this, 3, 2.5, 2. And then the little brushed and brushless stuff below that, like the whoops. A 4-inch quad is smaller, somewhat lighter than a 5-inch. It's great for a beginner because it's just a little bit slower, you know, and just smaller, and overall a little less powerful than a 5-inch. So it makes a good option for starting off. That doesn't mean you can't start on 5-inch or 6-inch or 3-inch. It really doesn't matter. You can start at any and you'll be fine. This one here is a Hyperlow RS. I actually helped the guy who runs this business, Richard Howard. I actually helped him design this quad because I was flying his original 4-inch racer a couple of years ago, and then he went to redesign it, and I was, you know what, I'd like a couple different things on it, and we ended up doing removable arms, because if you break an arm, you can easily replace it instead of having a full one-piece bottom plate. And a couple different things that we did to modernize the design. This quad uses a micro camera. There are 3 different sizes of cameras: the full size, mini, and micro. A lot of quads, even freestyle quads, are flying micro cameras these days. And there's also a nano version now, which is even smaller. This one uses 2204 motors. It's 4S, but can be flown on a 5S. This one runs KISS. I'll explain that in a second. And it's mainly a racing rig. However, it doesn't mean you have to race it. You can fly it just for fun. Normally, you don't have to necessarily be racing it. It is not really designed to carry a GoPro, though it'll fit in the front with the right size battery. It is mainly just made to fly it and race it. And most of the racers are not carrying a GoPro anyway because of weight. So this is what this is. It's made of carbon fiber. It has a full set of components for just a complete FPV quad. Let's start with a couple of things. There are 3 major firmware platforms in FPV. There is Betaflight, which is the most popular. Then you have KISS, which is what this is, and then you have FlightOne. I fly all 3 of them, and the reason I fly all 3 of them because I've always want to be the guy who knows and experiments, and because of that, I've always wanted to know what each firmware does and what the ins and outs, you know. There are other ones like CleanFlight, which, by the way, Betaflight came from CleanFlight, which came from Baseflight. That one's still around. It's not as popular, unfortunately. And there are a couple other different ones and smaller ones for like autopilots and things. That we're gonna focus on just the fact that there's 3 main ones, which 99% of FPV pilots, that's what they fly. Unless, well, there's other stuff for long range, but let's not get there. This guy here flies KISS. There is a all-in-one board here. It's a KISS CC. It is not a very popular board because it has some limitations as far as like it's not the best for a 5-inch quad. But I have about 7 of them that I've been flying over the years, for the last 3 years that I came out or something like that. Mostly on 4-inch. But I have flown in a 5-inch, and I've never actually damaged one. They've been great. The thing about it is, all-in-one means the ESCs, which are the speed controllers, and the flight controller itself are in one single board all together, where normally you have the flight controller and then you have the ESC separately, either on the arms or as a 4-in-1 ESC below the flight controller. Now, this KISS CC is based on KISS V1, which came out in late 2015, I believe. Now we have KISS V2. KISS V2 is, of course, more modern and it has more features. I am flying this, and take note, is on KISS 1.3 RC30, which my 4S KISS V1 quads still fly on. That firmware is 3 years old. It's very different than when the guys on Betaflight are doing that immediately upgrade. FlightOne, same. But as far as 4S quads on KISS V1, I'm still flying 1.3 RC30. One of the most famous pilots in FPV, you probably heard of him already, is Mr. Steele. He's flying KISS V2 now, which some of my quads are KISS V2. But up until recently, up until he actually switched to KISS V2, he was still flying 1.3 RC30. I asked him the other day, I was like, did you ever upgrade on KISS V1? I said, no, I always flew KISS V1, 1.3 RC30. So to my friend, I definitely recommend he stick to that. And when you fly, whether it's KISS, FlightOne, or Betaflight, doesn't matter, try to match the firmware that's in your board to the GUI. The GUI is the user interface, whatever the G means. That's how you control the board. KISS 1.3 RC30 uses 1.15.16. That's the number of the firmware. It comes prepackaged. If you use a different version of KISS, you want to use the firmware for the GUI in a computer that matches. Same thing with Betaflight. Betaflight is a little bit more flexible where you can upgrade to a newer version and some of the other ones still work. But when it comes to FlightOne and KISS, you really want it to match, otherwise it's going to have problems. All 3 of those firmwares run on Mac, PC, Android. Not all of them run on Android, but most of them run on Mac, PC. There's Linux versions, I believe. Just look for what's out there. For KISS, I know they kind of lean towards Mac quite a bit, which is good. But there's also Windows, there's also Android and whatnot. So you can definitely run the version you're looking for. Let's go more into detail on this thing. This is mainly a 4S quad. That means 4S is 4 in series. It's 4 cells in series. This battery right here is a 5S battery. So it has 5 cells. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is a race battery. It's a 6-cell battery. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then if I have a 4S battery somewhere, I can show you. But whatever, it has 4 cells. And each cell, the nominal voltage is around 3.7 volts. And it actually goes up to 4.2 unless you high charge. If you do the math, you'll find out that 4S is 16.8, 5S is about 20 or 21, I forgot, and then 6S is 25 volts and so on. The most popular voltages are 4S and 5S, well actually 4S and 6S, but 3S is used on smaller quads, and 5S, I fly a lot of 5S, so it's also quite popular. Before we go into more detail about the quad itself, let me point out batteries. Don't burn your house down. These batteries are very powerful, and you need to really take care and think about what you're doing. You want to store them at storage voltage. That means your cells should be at 3.8, 3.85. Use a good charger. Make sure to always charge with the balance port. So you want to have the main port and the balance port connected to your charger so it can monitor the battery, the voltage on each cell. because if one cell starts to go and it doesn't charge, the other ones will overcharge, or the other way around, and end up blowing the battery, causing a fire. So always monitor your batteries. Don't store them charged for more than a day or two. It's better if you don't store them charged at all, because they'll degrade. So you want to store them at 3.8 volts. You do not want to discharge a battery further down than 3.1 volts. I fly mine down to 3.5, and that's under load. Means I'm flying, I read 3.5, but when you stop flying, it's about 3.7. If I see 3.1, I'm still safe, because sometimes racing you end up doing that. But remember, when it's under load, the voltage will go down, and when you stop flying, it goes back up a little bit. The point is that if you get the battery, any cell under 3.1 volts, it starts degrading really quick. These batteries are expensive. You don't want to mess with them like that. You charge them up per cell to 4.2 volts. Some batteries are designed to be overcharged to 4.35, but only if you have a battery with that chemistry. Under normal conditions, you charge to 4.2 per cell. Just do the math, how that equates to the full 4S or 5S or 6X packs. Most chargers do the math for you. You just tell them, you just connect it. It knows, it feels if it's, it senses if it's a 5S, 4S, 6S pack, and then you charge it for the amount you're going to go for cell, like 4.2, and it'll charge to the correct amount. Some chargers will also discharge to storage. So keep all that in mind. The most important thing, don't store them charged. Always be in the room when you're charging batteries. Do not just go straight away for 5 minutes, because you have to be there if something goes wrong with them. And keep in mind that a normal fire extinguisher will not turn these batteries off because it's a chemical burn. So you definitely, chemical burn, that's what it's called. The point is that there's specific fire extinguishers that are meant for these batteries. So have a system or a plan on how you're going to put them off, like sand bucket or something. I've never had a battery go off, and I've been flying for 5 years, but I'm also always there. I just don't trust them. I'm always there when I'm charging, making sure that they not get hot. I touch them, and make sure, because the battery is the most important safety thing you have to be concerned about. Okay, so back to the quad. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the top plate off so we can look inside, and I'll point out some of the components so that you know what to look for, and also when you do your research, you can look up manuals and their websites and things like that so you can find more information. So let me go ahead and move the camera over. Okay, there we're staring at my chest, and we're gonna go ahead and point it down like so. I think the exposure is pretty good, so you should be able to see it. There you go. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and remove. Most of these quads use only 3 types of drivers. It uses the most popular one, which is a 2mm, and then I think 2.5, and the largest one, which is actually 2.5, and then there's a smaller one, which is used for really, let me see if I find one, for the really pointy stuff like the cameras, and this is actually 1.5. With those 3 drivers, you can do just about everything, because almost all screws it. And then the screws are 3mm, metric, 3mm. I try to use aluminum when I can because it's strong, it's lighter. But on some builds, I'll put steel if I need extra reinforcements. For example, on racing rigs, I like to put steel in the motor screws and some of the structural screws as well, simply because they're way stronger. On the freestyle stuff, I normally go aluminum because I don't crash them as hard. Okay, now we're gonna look inside, and hopefully that's pretty good. Okay, what we have here is a camera, which is then connected under here to the video transmitter, right? And then this is the flight controller ESC, so it's all in one piece. There's ESCs in each corner and then a flight controller underneath. Normally, like I said, you have one board for the flight controller and individual boards that go in the arms for the ESCs, which is the electronic speed controllers. Or you have 2 boards, which is one board on top, which is the flight controller. The one below is the speed controller. But in this case, it's all... What's wrong with the dog? In this case, it's all one piece. This is a capacitor. It is very common to use capacitors in these builds because it kind of cleans up the power. Not only does it make him fly better because there's less jitter in the electronics, but it also cleans up the video. So it's like a sponge. If there's spikes in power, the capacitor will suck them up and then spit them right out to keep a more linear, steadier voltage range throughout. Because these motors, when you slow down, you're shooting voltage into them, and when you are slowing down, they'll feed back in. So the system needs to constantly be monitored. Like basically the voltage goes up and down, and it needs to have capacitance throughout so that it can absorb that. Otherwise, you start breaking stuff. Stuff will start blowing out. This here is called an MMCX connector. This is pretty common, but the UFL connector is more common for antennas. And out goes, and then you go to the actual VTX antenna, video antenna. This here is called an SMA connector. Most builds will have an SMA so you can screw the antenna in, but some just go straight antenna into here as an MMCX or UFL. This video transmitter is by Team Black Sheep, also known as TBS. This is called a Unify. All my, well, 99% of my video transmitters are Team Black Sheep. It's what I prefer. I believe they're to be the best, and I've had like 25 or 30 of them, and I've only ever had 1 or 2 duds. They're great. Clean power, highly recommend them. This is what I go for. This one is a race version, which means it goes up to, this specific one goes up to 200 milliwatts. Trust me, that's plenty. On some rigs, I'll fly 600 milliwatt, 800 milliwatt. That's probably as high as I go for like long range. But you can actually, on a good day, you can go a mile or more on 200 milliwatts. For racing, you're normally going to use 25 milliwatts. This can be tuned down. It'll do 25 milliwatts. I believe it'll do 200, maybe 100 as well. But in the settings, so make sure to get a manual for this, because in the manual, it'll show you how to switch channels with the button here, and also what each of the lights mean. You have different bands that are used in FPV, which, you know, it's like race band, fat shark band. There's I believe, E. There's I normal E band, of course. I normally only fly race band, but there's all these bands, and then each band has a channel. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 until 8, and they're all controlled to here. You can know in the lights when you connect it, it'll give you a reading of what's it set to, and each of those bands has a number. So the number is like, for example, 5769 is R4, 5732 is like R1, and so on. It's something you want to definitely learn. I don't know all the frequency names, but the ones I use the most, I remember them. So keep in mind that to fly these legally, apart from all the things the FAA is doing for registering drones and all these things, you're supposed to go on a website, which is, I think, Drone Zone or something for the FAA, and then you register your drone, you put a number on it. That's one thing that came about recently in the last year. But as far as the radio frequency, this uses ham radio frequencies. That means that in order to use this legally, you're supposed to get a technician radio license or a radio technician license for ham certification. Every city in the United States has some kind of group where you can go and take this test. Just go online, study it, take the sample tests, and it's super easy. You can go in and get your license. The license is good for 10 years. I got mine when I first started. I wanted to be legal. I know a lot of guys that don't care and don't do it, but I believe you should. That's how you do that. Just get that license. There's other things you can do past radio technician, but that's the one you need for flying with these ham frequencies. Apart from that, as you can see, this is very simple. Normally, when you have these detached, there's wires that control each of the speed controllers, 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, because we got 4 motors. But because this is just one board, it's all in one place. If you ever burn something, you can get these. They used to be $100. Now they're about $50, $75, depending where you find them. You can just replace the whole thing, or you can go with another ESC and a separate board on top if you want to switch to like Betaflight or you want to try something else. But these are actually very good. It's just a matter of popularity or what you want to fly. But all these things are modular. So if you ever break something, you can definitely replace it. You break the camera, replace the camera. You break the lens, you replace the lens. You burn one of these, even though I normally don't do it, you can replace that. So everything is very modular. You just learn what you have here so that you can replace it, which also means get really good at soldering. All these solder joints I did myself. I've been soldering for a long time, so you have to get really good at it. Get a good soldering iron, something that goes up to like 800, even though you're not gonna run it that hot. But you want something that has, excuse me, a bit of a spade, like this guy. This is what I use the most. Let me see if it'll focus, because it's kind of wide. There we go, I think. Come on. Anyways, the point is it's not pointing. You want a little bit of spade so that you can actually transfer heat. So get good solder as well, like quality solder. I also like to use flux because it makes the whole process a lot easier. So practice. Get some. If you have buddies that fly stuff and have broken stuff, ask them for their broken components so you can practice soldering. Because I know guys that have started in this hobby and they've gone through a bunch of flight controllers, bunch of ESC burning them because they don't know how to solder. They'll short it and then it'll smoke and they have to start over. So keep that in mind. There is a learning curve to this hobby. It is not something you pick up just immediately. It takes a while. It does take a lot of studying, a lot of practice, a lot of reading, a lot of watching videos. If you're really serious about it, definitely put your time in, because it's gonna be enjoyable. You're gonna learn stuff. Some of you guys, like Mike, who bought this quad, he's into computers, and so he's pretty savvy, so he'll be able to figure it out pretty easily. But it's definitely something that there's a big learning curve, and it can get frustrating at times. Sometimes it's like super frustrating, even me with the experience. The hobby is a lot of working on the quads. It's not just flying. If you're just here for flying, this is not the right hobby for you, because you're gonna break stuff. Sometimes within the first flight, you know, I normally build. Now I've been doing this for a long time, so I'll build a quad and I'll go out and fly it, and I don't crash it. Like I'll put quads for sale because I've been testing, and I'm like, this never even crashed. People are like, never even crashed. I'm not gonna believe you. Listen, really, I did the math, but thousands of flights. So I can go out and fly a quad for a day, and if I won't crash if I don't want to. You know, if I'm crashing, it's because I'm trying new stuff and going risky, but I can fly around all day and not have to crash. Racing is a little bit different, but for freestyle. So yeah, that's totally possible. It's just a matter of, it's practice, like everything. It's not like what you're flying is, you have to have decent gear, of course, but it's the practice. It's all in the practice. Let's go back here so we can continue looking at this, and we'll go over a couple more points. I see the video is already 28 minutes. Let's see how far we can take this. Okay, a couple more things. These motors are 2204. That means that you need to focus. 2204 basically means that it's 22 millimeters wide by 4 millimeters tall. That is the size of the stator, which is what's inside. I don't think I have one here open, although I burnt one the other day, but I could probably show you if I find one. This is an old 2204, which has a bunch of lint on it. I threw it away, but if you open one of these motors up, you will see that what you're measuring is actually the stators themselves. There's popular motors are 2206, 2207, 2306, which means 23 millimeters wide by 6 millimeters tall, or 2307 even. There's different sizes. And then you get the smaller ones that go into the 1407, 1408, even smaller like 1105, 1101 or whatever. I don't fly a lot of the smaller ones. This 2204 is on the big side for 4-inch. A lot of 4-inch these days will fly 1407s, 1506, 1606. And again, don't let the math go crazy. The first two numbers are the width of the motor, and the second two numbers are the height. You know, you got big motors like 2814, I think it's what it is, they use for X class. So there's a big range of motors, and when you go into planes, they get even bigger. So it's not rocket science. Okay, these motors are basically AC. You know, the whole system runs in DC, but the motors themselves are alternating current. And because of the way that works, and it's basically a brushless motor. You know, you have a brush motor, it has positive and negative, it has brushes, but these motors have 3 wires, and the 3 wires alternate. And normally with today's systems, we just wire them straight, you know, 1 wire, 2nd wire, 3rd wire. because you can change in the firmware the motor direction, which we'll get to in a second. Back in the day, we have to switch the wires around because it's alternating. There's no necessarily positive or negative. If the motor's spinning right, or clockwise, all you have to do is swap around any two of the wires, and it'll make it spin the other way around. Any two of the wires. Okay, so now that that's out of the way. Oh, by the way, this is called race wire. All it is a PCB with traces. So it has 3 traces so the wires can go through. The reason we put these is twofold. One, when you crash in a race and bend a prop, you don't want the prop folding over and slicing your wires. So these PCBs are very strong. So what they'll do is they're able to resist getting cut by the prop. That's why we put those there. And the other reason is to make motor swaps a lot easier. If I have to swap a motor because I broke it or want to try something else, I don't have to go all the way into the quad and start taking them off here. I just desolder from here and solder right at the end, which is very convenient. Okay. All right, so let's talk about motor direction because this is very, very important. Let's go ahead and take these nuts off. Okay. Hopefully I'm exposing this video properly. I think it looks good in my screen here. Okay, so Mike, I appreciate that you've been patient in me sending you this quad. It's been a couple days, but every time I think about it, it was like I want to make sure that you enjoy this, and even if you have problems with you will, because that's just the way the hobby is. I want to make sure your quad here is solid and that you understand everything about it, so that it kind of like paves the way so it's easier for getting into it and getting through the learning curves. I'll get into the whole binding thing in a second. Okay, there's 2 ways that props will spin on a quad: normal direction and reverse. In normal direction, the props, they spin inwards. So that way and this way. One way to remember is like a dog. When a dog swims, he tends to put his arms like this. So you're going inwards, right? And in the back, it's the same thing. You turn the quad around, they go the same way. So these spin like that, and these go and spin like this. So in. So it's one way to remember is simply to turn it around. So you go in and then in the other way. Not in this way, but turn it around and you go in. That is normal direction. If you're setting up a quad to fly with props in normal direction, turn this over so I can see, you would put the prop like that. I use this prop specifically because it really shows the direction of where it spins. If you spin inwards, the top side of the blade needs to look in, because when you're spinning, imagine it's just pushing the air this way, you know, in order to lift. So remember that. This prop is very good to show you that because it has kind of a pointy edge here. So it shows you in which way the prop is supposed to spin, right? So when you put it on, you're spinning inwards like this, right? That is normal direction. This quad is reverse direction. So on this quad, the way I actually have it spinning, it's the other way around. So it's like that. On a reverse spinning prop quad, imagine a swimmer. When you swim in a pool, you don't go like a dog. Well, if you're learning, you do, but you normally push the water outwards, like that. That's how you remember. A reverse quad is outwards. The prop spin out. So your top high edge of the blade spins outwards. You know, I don't tell people, oh, the right motor spins clockwise, the left motor spins clockwise, because that's hard to remember. Just visually, you want to see that the quad goes like that, like if it's swimming out. And if you turn it around, in the back is the same thing. It goes like that. So outward spinning props is reverse. And the only reason it's reverse is because originally everybody spun in, and when they figured out they want to do outer, the only other option was calling it reverse, right? Normally on race quads, you spin out, and on freestyle quads, you spin in, but don't make it a rule because it does not matter. I have all my race quads, yes, spin out, but I have freestyle quads where I have them spinning in, and some I have them spinning out. I have a video about what to look for to remember how it should be spinning, how you set up your, because the thing is, if you put one of these props on and try to fly it and it's backwards, it'll freak out. Like if you put them all backwards, like these are all spinning out, but if you go ahead and turn them all so they're all spinning in and you try to fly, it's only going to push itself into the ground. But if you get any of these props the wrong way around, the quad will flip out like Tasmanian devil and it'll start breaking stuff. The props will break and you have to disarm immediately because it'll freak the hell out. So always be sure how your props are supposed to be put on the quad that you're flying. If you want, pick a setup, always out or always in. I don't care. I always remember because I know what quads are what. Sometimes I have them spinning out or in. And like I said, it's not a rule that race quads have to spin out and then freestyle quads have to spin in. That's kind of like how it's been. There's definitely pros and cons to it, which I'm not going to really go into this video because it's not the scope of the video. As a beginner, trust me, you will not notice a difference. Just pick one and go for it. Mike, since I'm sending you this quad spinning outwards, that's how you're going to do it. So, as you can see, front props spin out and rear props spin out as well. Out, okay? Okay, these are 4-inch props because the quad, of course, is a 4-inch quad. As you can see, the main thing that determines it is the spacing. Notice how close it gets here, but it doesn't touch. If I were to put a 5-inch prop here, it's going to crash into the plate and the arms would need to be longer. As far as other things we need to look at, there's KV. These motors are 2350 KV. It is a little on the low side for a 4-inch quad, but the nice thing about it is that for a beginner, it's perfectly fine. And I myself flew 2300 kV on 4-inch for a long time. I will find it underpowered now, but trust me, it's gonna feel plenty powerful for anybody beginning in the hobby. It's gonna be like, wait, this is super fast, even though technically it isn't. This quad is built with these motors mainly because I wanted to fly 5S with it, and as you go up in voltage, your KV needs to go down. This board is rated to 4S, by the way, but it flies on 5S just fine with a proper cap. Just gotta be careful and make sure you prop it correctly. But KV can get confusing. I'm not gonna explain exactly what KV means, but basically what it determines is how many spins it will do based on how much voltage you feed it. But the exact math is not important, at least not right now. I forget all the time and I don't care. It's just remember the relationship. So to give you an example, on 4S, which is what this is going to fly, on a 5-inch quad, normally you're going to fly 23 to 2500 kV. If it's 5S, then like 2150 kV, 6S, 1700 kV. And also, if you stick to 4S, the numbers go up as the size of the prop goes down. So, for example, if you're flying 2300 kV on 5S, when you go down to 5-inch, to 4-inch from 5-inch, you would do like 2800 or 3000 kV. That's if you're looking for a maximum like speed. If you go to 3-inch, then you start going into 3500 to 4000 kV. 2.5-inch, 4500, 5000 kV. And as you go up, the numbers and prop size, the kV number goes down. So for example, a 6-inch quad on 4S will fly 2150 kV. 7-inch, now you start looking at 1900, 1800 kV. And if you increase the voltage, then you got to drop that number down more. There's a relationship. I know all these numbers like just like the back of my hand, but it takes time. I would suggest any beginner to start on 4S. Do not start on 3S unless you are going micro quads. 4S is good for beginners. You could do 5S if you wanted to. It doesn't really, just pick something. But 4S is good because it's cheaper. The batteries are cheaper. As soon as you start going 5, 6S, the batteries get more expensive. So for starting, 4S is good and it'll last you a long time. If you think you're the type of guy that progresses really fast, you might want to start on 5S. I still fly some 4S quads here and there, but normally I'm flying 5S and 6S, which is one reason I'm saying this, because I kind of outgrown it. But it's still a fantastic quad. Let me think. Forgot anything. This video's about 40 minutes long now, so I probably should start thinking about cutting it. Let me pause it for a second so I can put the top plate back on and then go over a couple more things and close this. Actually, I just remember I wanted to go over something before I put the top plate back on. The quad right now does not have a receiver installed. There's FrSky. We have there's ACCST. There's ACCESS. There's different protocols. FrSky was and probably still is pretty popular, but people have been moving on more into more robust 900 megahertz links. So just backtrack a little bit. The standard setups are 2.4 gigahertz, and that is, for example, the standard Spektrum, I believe, is 2.4. FrSky is 2.4. The normal ACCST and the ACCESS protocols, they are 2.4. But however, 900 megahertz around that band is kind of really popular. Crossfire by TBS is what I fly. It's around 900 megahertz. Then there's R9 by FrSky, which is around there as well. And the main reason is because it's a bigger wave, more robust link, and you can go further and have less latency. 2.4 is great. A lot of guys still fly it, and you can fail-safe a little bit more easily because there's a lot of Wi-Fi, which is 2.4 out there, and it can cause interference, and the signal is just not as robust. But if you're going to be flying close by, you know, up to half a mile or whatever, it's fine. You can run any of those setups just fine. My buddy Mike, he has Spektrum, so that's one thing I wanted to point out. Most receivers, listen to this because it's important, run on 5 volt. Like Crossfire, R9 I think runs on 5 volt. All the FrSky stuff runs on 5 volt. So normally these boards will have a ground and a 5 volt to power the receiver. Because there's a regulator on the board. And also you keep in mind, you know, if a board is rated for 4S or 5S, it's because it can actually, not only the FETs and the other components handle that voltage, but also the regulator that'll convert down to 5 volts needs to be able to handle it. So it can feed itself, because the boards themselves work on 5 volts, except the MCU. The MCU or the gyro, I believe, work on 3.3 volts, which brings me to Spektrum. Spektrum, as far as I know, all of them, maybe not the most recent ones, but all the Spektrum receivers that I'm aware of, and also the ones that are like DSMX protocol that are not Spektrum branded, but they're meant to work with Spektrum, they run on 3.3 volts. So this guy here has these pads for signal, telemetry, ground, and power. A receiver will normally run either 3 wires or 4 wires. It'll run power, which is the voltage. If it's Spektrum, 3.3 volts. Underneath this board, there is a 3.3 volt pad. If you plug a Spektrum receiver into a 5 volt pad, you're going to smoke it. So important. Always search for the 3. Most boards will have a 3.3 pad because not only does the MCU, I believe, run on 3.3, but they use that to also run Spektrum receivers. So I would say almost 100% of boards out there do have a 3.3 volt pad for like Spektrum receivers. So normally a receiver will run 3 wires. The 2 main ones are power and ground, of course, and then you have signal. A lot of Spektrum receivers do not have telemetry, so you don't even have to connect the telemetry wire. So think about it this way. The signal wire feeds the board a signal, and the telemetry wire feeds it back to the receiver, which sends information to the controller. Telemetry basically says, okay, it can be used to gauge like RPMs, it can be used to gauge power consumption, and normally it's used to gauge the voltage. It tells you the voltage of the battery. Luckily, this camera will also in the OSD read you the voltage of the battery so you can monitor it, because you don't want to fly until the point where it drops out of the sky because you'll ruin the battery. You want to monitor your voltage. But telemetry does that. It allows you to get readings off the board. I used to run telemetry on everything. Nowadays, I don't even care because I just know what my stuff needs to be doing. And normally on long range quads, yeah, I'll fly telemetry, but on race quads, I don't even use it. Freestyle quads, most of them don't. I just use the OSD and check the voltage and the power consumption in the OSD. This quad will give you all the information in the board itself, and you can get it by telemetry. I have a video. I just check all the videos on my channel because there's a bunch of stuff that I've posted over the years. I'll link to what I can, but there's one where I show how to get mAh readings, which is mAh is milliamp hours used, which is the way you it's a lot of information, which is the way where you calculate the usage of a battery, because a battery will have, for example, this is a 1300, means it's 1.3 amps, which is 1300 milliamps. That is how much space or how much juice the battery has. As you consume power, you're consuming milliamp hours, which reduces the voltage, so they work together. So for example, when this battery is reaching 900 or 1000 milliamp hours used, you'll start seeing the voltage per cell drop to about 3.6. And this is a 5S, but imagine it's a 4S, it would be about 14 point something volts. 14.5, 14.6, I think it is. You'll start seeing it drop. So it's a direct relationship between your milliamp hours and your voltage. You can go just by voltage, but it's often really helpful to have both milliamp hours and voltage. This setup will only show you in the OSD, in the on-screen display, the voltage set up in the camera, but you can also do telemetry, and some of the Betaflight setups will read you everything. KISS normally needs an external OSD to be able to do all these things, but normally you can go by voltage alone. That is the most important one. A couple things I wanted to point out. The camera. This camera is already preset to work. There are 2 pins on this side though that are there for OSD. What it does is you connect an OSD, which is kind of a joystick. Let me see if I have one here. There you go. So you connect this joystick into the camera, and with these buttons you control the settings of the cameras, how you want the picture to look, but you also control things like the OSD for the voltage and your name. You can put your call sign on it and whatnot. I'll put one of these in the box as well, so that you can control your camera. Oof. Okay, let's starting to get to the end of this video. I want to go over a couple safety things and a bit of a demo on plugging in and whatnot. Let me go ahead and put this towards where we can see the quad again. There we go. Okay, so when we set it up with the battery, make sure to either put a rubber band around the balance plugs, because you don't want them to get chopped. This guy has a strap, but most batteries do not. So keep that in mind, because you don't want to go and chop either your balance leads or the main leads. So we're going to strap this guy in with our 2 straps over here. I like to put this guy, actually I like to do it like this. So I like to put this to hold it in place under one of these straps like that. There's all kinds of different ways to do this, but this is one. And then like that. Keep in mind that the leads on different batteries will vary, so make sure they're just out of the way so they don't get chopped into the props. So I'll do it like that. Also keep in mind the CG, you want to center it so that if you put your fingers around the flight controller in the center, the quad wants to balance itself. If you put the battery too far forward or too far back, it's not going to fly very well. You want it centered. If you have a GoPro in the front, your battery will be further back, but your weight will still be in the center. Okay, so we're going to hold and plug it in. When we plug in, you're going to hear startup chimes. So that beep, beep, beep is very normal. That tells you it's ready. I don't have the radio connected to it because there's no receiver, so of course I cannot arm it. But normally when you plug it in, it'll do some chimes on the ESCs to let you know they're initializing. And when the FC initializes, go beep, beep, beep. Do not move the quad. You want to keep it still to let it initialize. Okay, and as far as the most important safety thing that you have to remember when you're working on these quads is take the props off. What that means is that anytime you are making firmware updates, changes in the GUI, updates, firmware updates, whether it's for the receiver or for the flight controller or the ESCs, especially those, take the props off. If you're making edits with the battery on, make sure the props are on. If you're calibrating ESCs, make sure the props are off. Props off. Because if something were to go wrong, whether something fails, you yourself make a mistake, or there's a problem with the firmware in the way installed or written or whatever, the quad will try to kill you. It will try to jump up and spin around, and this thing spins at how many RPMs, and they slice. So I've seen so many accidents. I cannot stress this enough. Do not make edits. Do not make firmware updates. Do not do any of those things. If you're gonna plug in the battery, make sure to have the props off, and that means completely taking them off, like the nut off and the prop completely off. I have seen so many bad photos of people ripped open, blood everywhere, stitches, because they're too lazy to take the props off. It's always like, it ain't gonna happen to me, and then one day it happens. So always that's the biggest safety feature. A couple more things I gotta point out. Back in the day, we used to arm with stick commands, like, I don't even remember what they were, but now we arm with a switch. So you put, I don't have a transmitter here, but you'll select a switch on your transmitter that's arm and disarm. So you gotta click up and click down to arm and disarm. So when you crash, disarm. You need to go back up, you arm again. There's also things like turtle mode, which allows you to turn the quad over. It basically spins the prop in the opposite direction to flip yourself over if you end up upside down. And then one other thing you gotta learn is ESC protocols. Do some research. Right now, the most popular ESC protocol is Dshot. Most of ESCs these days can do Dshot, but Dshot is a digital protocol, but it has different speeds. So there's Dshot whatever low 300. There we go. There's Dshot 300, Dshot 600, Dshot 1200. There's even now 2400 and 3200. This guy runs on Dshot 600. It's very popular. Usually these days Dshot 600 and 1200 will be the most popular. You also have Multishot, one shot 25, one shot 42, I believe. Those are not really used that much anymore. Multishot is still kind of used. Those are not digital protocols. So for the most part, moving forward, you will be using Dshot. There's versions of ProShot, and there's Dshot 64 and all kinds of stuff. But I think for the next year or so, Dshot is still the protocol. And KISS uses Dshot. BL Heli 32 and BL Heli S use Dshot. Again, I don't want to confuse you. Do the research, but ESCs normally run that kind of firmware. The KISS stuff works on KISS. It uses KISS firmware. But then you have BL Heli S and BL Heli 32, which is what the main one right now. And that is used by all flight controllers. KISS can use it, even though it cannot flash it. It can use it. FlightOne and then Betaflight both use BL Heli 32 for the time being. There's talk about something new coming, especially from FlightOne. We'll see. But normally that's it. There are GUIs for all these things. There's a GUI, a user interface for KISS. There's one for FlightOne. There's Betaflight GUI. Then you have BL Heli 32 Suite, which is to control BL Heli 32 ESCs. And then you have BL Heli Suite, which is used for BL Heli S ESCs. And then this stuff is flashed with the KISS. So KISS 1516, which is what's for this quad, will flash the ESCs to 111 or whatever they have to be to run with 1.3 RC30. You kind of have to match them. Don't get hung up on this KISS. This firmware is old. I pointed out because I still fly it. It is really good. But these days, you guys are flying KISS V2 on whatever the newest version is. I forgot. But then FlightOne has Falco X, which is their newest, which doesn't have a GUI yet. And then their numbering for the regular FlightOne has a bunch of different numbers too. You would have to look for those in the website. And the Betaflight is on 4.0, which is 4.07 or 4.05 right now. I don't know because I actually fly 4.0. I fly Betaflight 3.7 still, which is a year old, but it's very good. The most popular firmware is Betaflight by far. So even though you're starting off with KISS, or for somebody else who's watching this, they might start in Betaflight, I do recommend you try Betaflight at some point. I believe KISS flies better, but Betaflight has certain things that I like, for example, for long range, and that's what I'll use. This quad here is on Betaflight. I just finished building this guy. This is Betaflight. And then you got this one here, which is like my main freestyle rig. This is on FlightOne Falco X. But then I also have a couple of KISS V1 and V2 rigs that I fly a lot as well. Okay, I think that is it. I'm sure there's stuff I missed. This is not intended to be a full guide for the beginner, but yes, of course. I want to point out Spektrum receivers real quick. FrSky receivers, TBS Crossfire and R9, you bind them with a button. That means you press a button on the receiver so it starts flashing, and then you go to the radio and say bind, and they'll talk to each other and bind, and then your model is connected to the radio. Spektrum, however, for example, this is a Lemon RX receiver. Spektrum, when we started using Spektrum on mini quads, Spektrum had these small satellite receivers which weren't really meant to be used by themselves. They were supposed to be used linked with a bigger receiver and planes to have like redundancy. But I found out at the time that those satellite receivers was really small, so we started using them in mini quads. But they don't have a button, so you can't really bind them with a just pressing a button. So you have to go in the CLI and Betaflight and bind them, or you have to hook them up to another receiver, bind the receiver so that your satellite binds. This is old, guys, but it still works. But I want to point it out. So it'll bind. So Mike, when you get this, try and bind using a receiver, bind to your Spektrum. If you can't get that to work, I'm pretty sure that the newer Spektrum stuff, because Spektrum is finally putting a lot of work into their mini quad line. They at first they were kind of half-assing it. They were releasing stuff, but they weren't understanding what the FPV community wanted. Finally, they were like, okay, we probably should take this stuff seriously. And they started really learning about what we need. And there's top guys like Dolma, FPV, Andy. He flies Spektrum. There's a bunch of other guys that fly Spektrum now. And they actually have legitimate Spektrum setup, Spektrum receivers that can easily be bound. And of course, Spektrum, FrSky, and Jumper, OpenTX, a lot of these systems will work with a Crossfire module, even though there's caveats. So just be careful. There's certain new FrSky systems that don't work with Crossfire because it's TBS. So always do your research, because there's compatibility issues that you need to learn and things that you have to watch out for. Otherwise, it's the information's out there, but you have to look for it. All right, I think that's enough. We're gonna close this. It's been a long video. Now I'm pretty sure it's an hour, so I hope you stuck around. I thank you for watching. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. I try to reply to everything I get. The channel's not very big, so I can still keep up. Eventually, I think it'll be a little bit harder, but for now, it's doable. Watch my other videos. There's a lot of little gold nuggets here and there for you guys that are starting off that can definitely put you in the right path. There's other guys out there that are also very good at teaching. But yeah, go through my backlog of videos. There's a lot of stuff that you can definitely, from building, soldering, programming, tuning, you name it, it's there. And then, of course, flight videos for just fun and whatnot. So, guys, thumbs up. Share this video with friends. Anybody that that's starting out that you want to help out, share this video with them. Post it on Facebook, whatever you need to do so that it gets shown to people. Like I said, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. There's more of this coming, and I appreciate you subscribing. So for now, yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Have fun.